Hello, you guys. Welcome to lesson 2, the history of money. In this lesson, we'll talk about the origins of money, where money all started, what the difference between true money and fiat currency is, which most of us get confused. And finally, we'll talk about the future of money and how digital currencies and digital forms of money are emerging as very powerful technologies in our society. So let's get started. Let's talk about the origins of money. Right? So money, all throughout human society and history, we've used some form of money to transact value. Earlier times when humans were hunter-gatherers, we would use things like rice and corn to transfer value, right? But after a while, it became a little difficult to trade rice for cows because oftentimes, there would be some type of inequality going on in that particular trade, right? So people decided that we needed something a little more consistent, a little more solid. We eventually graduated to different things across the spectrum of time. We actually use rocks. We use these huge circular rocks, these boulder style rocks with a hole in the middle to assign value, right? And the larger the rock was, the more value it held, right? So there's this really interesting story where there was this guy or merchant, he was traveling across the seas with this big boulder, right? And his boat sank. Right? So once the boat sank, the boulder sank to the bottom of the ocean. But the way society worked during that time, everyone knew that he had this particular boulder. So the fact that they knew that this boulder was still his, he still had that wealth and he was still able to trade with it in the form of, I guess, an IOU back in that time. That's a much ancient representation of what we call banknotes or notes that represent, our true value, right? So I thought that was really interesting. But as you can see, there's problems, there's flaws with that system. So we naturally evolved our monetary system and we eventually went to things like precious metals. We saw gold and silver really take off during the Roman empires when kings and the emperors would actually mint coins to represent the value in their kingdom, right? So during that time, the kings and the governments were in charge of creating these gold coins. And the way that they would collect taxes is they would actually shave pieces of the gold coin off, right? And also other people would shave pieces of the gold coin off, right? And eventually these gold coins over time became less and less valuable because they weighed less, right? So we're seeing the evolution of money, but we're also seeing the flaws in that system, right? So from gold came banks, right? And the purpose of those banks during that time was to actually hold our value, store our gold, and give us some type of representative or some type of note that represented a certain amount of gold that we had, because it was very inconvenient to carry gold around with us, right? It's very inconvenient to have to chip away gold to pay for smaller things, right? So it became a necessity to have this banking infrastructure put in place. So in all actuality, money has taken several leaps and bounds over the years, and each iteration, it gets better and better and better. So that brings me to my next very important point, which is the difference between fiat currency and true money. Money and fiat currency are two different things. Fiat currency is typically a representative or representation of money. Okay, so in that case, what is money? Well, if we look at the characteristics of good forms of money, they have a few things in common, right? So money has to be durable, it has to be fungible, and it has to be divisible, and it has to be a store of value. So if we look at gold, we see that gold is durable. We see that gold is divisible because we can break gold bars up into several different pieces. We see that gold is a store of value. We as people agree that gold has value, right? So these are fundamental qualities of a good form of money. When we look at fiat currencies, in the beginning, our dollar was backed by gold. So in the early 70s, we came off of that gold standard, right? Our government made some decisions that made our US dollar no longer backed by this powerful asset called gold, right? And they said, you know what, we're going to back the US dollar against our own merit, right? And if we look at history, all fiat currencies eventually go to zero. So there are different time frames where those fiat currencies devalue and depreciate over time, but consistently every single fiat currency has always gone to zero. But if we look at the true form of money, gold, we may not use it in everyday transactions, but it's still globally accepted as a strong store of value that you can use to purchase things with, right? And make sure that you store that wealth, which is what we're after, which is what our goal is. So fast forward to 2020 or the new millennial, right? 2000 and beyond, we see that money has began to evolve again. So aside from having paper currencies, now we've graduated from that to having our money represented on plastic, on debit cards, right? So now we've seen the first iteration of digital money, right? And as technology compounds year over year, we get faster, we get better, we get more efficient systems in place. So if we look at the direction that money has been going, it makes perfect sense why Bitcoin was created. And Bitcoin was created as a superior form of money. Bitcoin is a strong store of value. Bitcoin is durable. Bitcoin is infinitely divisible. Bitcoin is fungible, which means that every single Bitcoin is the same way that if I give you a dollar bill, you can trust that this is the same dollar bill that Joe might give you. If I give you a Bitcoin, this is the same Bitcoin that you may get from someone else. It makes no difference who holds that Bitcoin. It's the same Bitcoin across the entire network. Fungibility is something very important in money. Now, something that technology has added to our monetary system that's very powerful that we've never had before is transparency. Every single transaction in this new monetary system of Bitcoin, right? This new monetary network can be seen. There are no secrets. We may not know who's behind the transaction, but we know the transaction occurred and we know where that transaction started and we know where that transaction finished. So that's a very, very unique aspect of the Bitcoin form of money. And it's important. It's important to keep that in the back of your mind because it'll be important as we continue to implement Bitcoin into our society. So wrapping up lesson 2, history of money, we've covered the origins of money, we've covered the evolution of money, and we've covered what money looks like today and what the next evolution of money looks like. So with this information, you should have a much clearer understanding of how Bitcoin plays a much larger role in our society than many people think. And it lays out the case perfectly on why Bitcoin has been gaining more and more steam every single year because it is the newest form of money. It is the newest evolution of money. People are slow to accept evolution, but eventually everyone accepts it. People were slow to accept those banknotes in exchange for their gold, but eventually it caught on and accepted. People were skeptical about cell phones at first, but eventually it caught on. The same situation applies with this new technology. As it becomes more and more consistent and people see that it's not failing, more people will buy into this monetary network. With that being said, I hope you guys took some good notes and we'll see you in the next video.